The stars had many secrets, but none greater than the one hidden behind the invisible wall that surrounded a small yellow sun at the edge of the galaxy. For 10,000 years, that wall had stood strong. No ship could pass through it. No signal could escape from within. To the rest of the universe, the space behind that wall simply did not exist. Commander Xylith was tired. She had been mapping empty space for 3 months, charting regions where nothing interesting ever happened. Her crew was bored. Her ship needed repairs, and she was counting the days until she could return home to the warm seas of her planet. The Vorn people were not made for long journeys through the cold darkness between stars. Her sensors beeped. Xylith looked at the screen and frowned. There was something wrong with the readings. According to her instruments, there was a perfect sphere of nothing directly ahead. Not empty space. Not a black hole. Just nothing. As if someone had cut a piece out of reality itself. She ordered her pilot to move closer. The sphere was massive, larger than entire star systems. Its surface shimmered like water under moonlight, but when Xylith tried to scan what lay beyond, her instruments returned only silence. "What is this?" she whispered. Her science officer, a young male named Torek, ran every test he could think of. "I have never seen anything like it," he admitted. "It appears to be artificial. Someone built this." Xylith felt a chill run down her spine. The Galactic Conclave had mapped every corner of known space. There were no secrets left to discover. And yet here was something that no record mentioned, no archive described, no story told. She sent a report to her superiors. She expected them to be excited, perhaps even grateful. Discovery of this magnitude could make her career. She imagined the honors, the promotions, the place in history books. Instead, 3 days later, a ship appeared beside hers. It was ancient, its design unlike anything Xylith had ever seen. When the beings aboard that ship came to meet her, she understood why. They were archivists. No one knew how old the archivists were. Some said they had existed before the first stars were born. They kept the records of the universe, storing every piece of knowledge that had ever existed. They answered to no government, followed no laws but their own, and had not left their hidden sanctuary in 800 years. Until now, 3 of them stood before Xylith in her small meeting room. They were tall and thin, their skin like dried paper, their eyes like deep wells with no bottom. When they spoke, their voices seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You will forget what you found," they said. "You will delete your records. You will never speak of this place again." Xylith wanted to argue, but something in their eyes stopped her. It was not anger she saw there. It was fear, pure ancient fear. "What is behind that wall?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The oldest archivist, the one called Morith, was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke a single word. "Humans." Xylith had never heard the word before, but from the way the archivist said it, she knew it meant something terrible. Morith told her a story that night. He told her of a species that had once walked among the stars, a species so powerful that they could reshape reality with their thoughts. They had built wonders that still stood after billions of years. They had created life on barren worlds. They had lit the fires of new suns. And then they had gone to war with themselves. The conflict lasted only a few years, but it nearly destroyed everything. Galaxies were torn apart. Whole species vanished. The fabric of space and time was scarred so deeply that the wound still ached 10,000 years later. When the war ended, the survivors made a choice. They could not trust themselves with their power, so they chose to forget. They erased their own memories, sealed themselves behind a wall of their own making, and started over as primitive beings on a small blue planet. The wall was meant to last forever. The humans were meant to stay forgotten. But nothing lasts forever. "The barrier is failing," Morith admitted. "Cracks have appeared. Small ones, but growing, and through those cracks, signals have escaped. The humans are waking up. Commander, they have built ships. They have split the atom. They have touched their moon with their hands. Soon, very soon, they will break through the wall. What happens then?" Xylith asked, Morit did not answer immediately. He walked to the window of her ship and stared out at the stars. 10,000 years ago, before they chose to forget, the humans left us with a warning. They said that if they ever remembered what they truly were, the universe might not survive. We do not know what that means. We only know that the beings who created stars and shaped galaxies were afraid of themselves. And if they were afraid, Commander, then we should be terrified. Xylith deleted her records that night. She changed her course and flew away from the invisible wall as fast as her ship could carry her. She tried to forget what she had seen, what she had heard, but sleep brought dreams. Strange dreams of a small blue planet filled with strange creatures who laughed and cried and loved and hated. Creatures who built great cities and then destroyed them. Creatures who wrote poetry about the stars they could not reach. Creatures who had no idea what they really were. 3 months later, the first crack in the barrier split wide open. A ship emerged from within. It was small and crude, nothing compared to the vessels of the Conclave. Its name, painted on its hull in a language no one had seen in millennia, was Horizon's Edge, and aboard that ship were 43 humans, looking at the stars with wonder in their eyes, not knowing that every species in the galaxy was watching with a mixture of hope and horror. The secret was about to be revealed, and nothing would ever be the same again. Xylith watched the news reports from her home, surrounded by her family, her hands trembling. She had kept the archivist's secret. She had told no one. But now the universe would learn the truth. The wall had fallen. The humans were free. And somewhere deep in the memory of the cosmos itself, something ancient began to stir. Captain Daniel Vance had dreamed of the stars since he was a child. He remembered lying in the grass behind his family's small house, watching the night sky, wondering if anyone was out there watching back. Now, at 42 years old, he stood on the bridge of humanity's first interstellar vessel and watched those same stars rush past his windows. The Horizon's Edge was not a pretty ship. It was built for function, not beauty. Its hull was thick and gray, covered with sensors and antennas. Its engines burned with blue fire that pushed it faster than any human had ever traveled. 43 crew members lived and worked within its walls, each of them chosen for this mission from thousands of volunteers. None of them knew they had been living in a prison. Lieutenant Kate Morrison was in her small office when the first alien signal reached the ship. She was the team's language expert, trained to find patterns in any form of communication. When her computer began displaying the strange symbols, her heart nearly stopped. "Captain," she said into her communicator, her voice shaking. "You need to see this." Daniel came quickly. He stood beside her as she played the signal again and again, running it through every translation program they had. The symbols slowly became words. The words became sentences. And the sentences became a message that made no sense. "It is a warning," Kate said finally. "It says we should turn back. It says humans are not allowed to leave our space." She paused, her face pale. "It says we are dangerous." Daniel laughed. He could not help it. The idea was too strange. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting itself, nearly destroying itself a dozen times over. They had only achieved peace 200 years ago, when the nations of Earth finally agreed that survival mattered more than borders. They considered themselves lucky to have made it this far. "Dangerous to who?" he asked. Kate had no answer. The first alien ship appeared 3 days later. It was beautiful in a way the Horizon's Edge was not. Its hull curved like a wave frozen in metal. Its engines glowed with soft purple light. When it moved, it seemed to dance rather than fly. Daniel ordered his crew to prepare for contact. They had practiced this moment 1,000 times in simulations. First contact with alien life. The greatest moment in human history. Everyone was nervous, but they were also excited. This was why they had come. The alien ship carried Vorn. They were tall beings with blue-green skin and large dark eyes. Their bodies were built for water, with fins along their arms and gills on their necks. They moved with grace, as if even the air around them was something to swim through. The two crews met in a neutral space between the ships, both groups wearing environmental suits. Daniel stepped forward and raised his hand in greeting, just as the protocol suggested. The Vorn fell to their knees. All of them, every single one. They dropped to the floor and pressed their faces to the ground, making sounds that the translator struggled to interpret. It took several minutes before Kate understood what they were saying. "The architects have returned," she translated, her voice barely above a whisper. "The builders, the ones who shaped the stars. They are calling us gods." Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at his crew, at the simple humans in their simple suits, and then at the aliens worshipping at their feet. "There has been a mistake," he said. "We are just explorers. We came in peace. We do not even know what an architect is." The lead Vorn, a female named Xylith, slowly raised her head. Her dark eyes were filled with confusion and something that looked like awe. "You truly do not remember," she said. "The stories were true. You made yourself forget." That night, Xylith told them everything she knew. She spoke of ancient legends passed down through generations. She described the beings who had existed before her species was born, beings who could create matter from thought and bend space with their will. She showed them images from old texts, drawings of creatures that looked exactly like humans, standing among the stars with fire in their hands. "The archivists guard the full truth," she explained. "They keep the records of what really happened. But every species knows the old stories. The shapers, the makers, the ones who could dream things into existence. When they disappeared, the universe grew dark. We have been waiting for their return ever since." Kate sat in silence, trying to process what she was hearing. It could not be true. Humans were ordinary. They struggled to survive on their own planet. They made mistakes. They got sick. They died. If we were so powerful, she asked, why did we forget? Why did we lock ourselves away? Xylith's expression grew sad. The stories say you went to war, not with other species, with each other. The destruction was so terrible that the universe itself was nearly broken. When the war ended, the survivors were ashamed. They chose to become small, to become weak, to forget what they had been. They hoped that starting over would give them a chance to be better. Daniel thought of human history, the wars, the suffering, the slow, painful climb toward peace. Maybe there was something to this story after all. Maybe the violence that had haunted humanity was an echo of something much older. The barrier around our system, he said slowly. We did not even know it was there. Did we build it ourselves? Xylith nodded. You created it to keep yourselves contained, a prison of your own making. But the barrier has been failing for years. And now you are here, standing before me, and I do not know whether to celebrate or to run. Daniel looked at his crew, 43 ordinary people who had just learned they might be the descendants of gods. He could see the fear in their eyes, but also something else. Curiosity, hope, the same feelings that had driven them to leave Earth in the first place. We are not gods, he said firmly. Whatever our ancestors were, we are just human. We came here to explore, to learn, to make friends. That has not changed. Xylith studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. Perhaps that is exactly what the universe needs, she said. Shapers who do not want to shape. Makers who only wish to meet. If your people have truly changed, then maybe the old warnings were wrong. Maybe there is hope after all. But even as she spoke, Xylith knew that not everyone would see it that way. The archivists had kept the truth hidden for 10,000 years. They had built their power on the fear of humanity's return. They would not welcome these visitors with open arms. The real test was still to come. The archivist sanctuary existed outside of normal space. To reach it, the horizon's edge had to pass through a doorway that should not have existed, a hole in reality that led somewhere else entirely. Daniel watched through the window as stars disappeared and strange colors took their place. For a moment, he felt like his body was being stretched and compressed at the same time. Then it was over, and they were somewhere new. The sanctuary was a sphere the size of a small moon, floating in a sea of soft golden light. Its surface was covered with symbols that seemed to move when Daniel looked at them directly. Ancient writing, Kate explained. A language so old that no living species could read it, except, perhaps, for humans. The archivist sent a small vessel to guide them to a docking bay. Inside, the air smelled of dust and time. The walls were made of something that looked like stone, but felt warm to the touch. Every surface was covered with carvings, paintings, and inscriptions. And everywhere, Daniel saw humans, not just drawings. Full images, detailed and perfect, showing humans in ways he had never imagined. Humans standing in space without suits, breathing nothing and needing nothing. Humans holding stars in their hands like children holding toys. Humans shaping planets with their thoughts, pulling matter from empty space, creating life where there had been only rock. "This cannot be real," whispered Ryan Peters, the ship's engineer. He was a practical man who believed only in things he could touch and measure, but the evidence surrounded him on every wall. The oldest archivist came to meet them. His name was Morith, and he had been alive since before the barrier was built. His body was thin and bent, held together by machines that hummed quietly beneath his robes. His eyes were like pools of darkness, showing nothing but reflecting everything. "Welcome," he said, and his voice echoed to the chamber as if 1,000 people were speaking at once. "We have been waiting for you. We hoped you would never come, but we knew you would." Daniel stepped forward. "We want the truth. All of it. What are we really?" Morith was silent for a long moment. Then he turned and walked deeper into the sanctuary, gesturing for the humans to follow. They walked through halls that seemed to go on forever, past doors that led to rooms filled with light and shadow. Finally, they reached a chamber at the very heart of the structure. Inside was a single object. It looked like a crystal ball, but larger, almost as tall as Daniel himself. Inside the crystal, images moved and swirled like clouds in a storm. "This is the memory," Morith explained. "It contains a complete record of your species. Every thought, every dream, every action, from the very beginning until the day you chose to forget. No other species has a memory. Only humans were significant enough to require one." He touched the crystal, and suddenly the room filled with light. Daniel felt himself falling, not through space, but through time. He saw things his mind could barely process. He saw the birth of the first human, not on Earth, but in the heart of a dying star. He saw humans spreading across the universe, like seeds carried by the wind. He saw them building things that defied understanding, ships that traveled through time, cities that existed in multiple dimensions at once, gardens where new forms of life grew from pure imagination. The power came from something deep within the human mind. When enough humans believed something strongly enough, reality changed to match their belief. It was not magic. It was something stranger, something that even a memory could not fully explain. The universe itself seemed to listen when humans spoke. But then Daniel saw the war. It started slowly, as such things always do. Some humans wanted to use their power to control, to dominate, to reshape existence according to their own vision. Others wanted to step back, to let the universe grow on its own, to create only when asked. The disagreement grew into arguments. Arguments became conflict. Conflict became destruction. Daniel watched galaxies burn. He saw stars twisted into weapons. He watched as the fabric of reality itself was torn and bleeding, crying out in pain that echoed across all of existence. Billions of species, most of which had never even heard of humans, were erased in an instant. Entire dimensions collapsed into nothing. When the war ended, only a handful of humans remained. They stood in the ruins of everything they had built, looking at what their power had done. And they made a choice. "We decided forget," Daniel whispered, not knowing how he knew this, but knowing it was true. "We chose to become small, to become weak, to lock ourselves away until we could learn to be better." Morith nodded slowly. "You built the barrier with the last of your power. You erased your own memories and the memories of your children. You became primitive, mortal, limited. You hoped that millions of years of struggle would teach you wisdom. That hardship would give you compassion. That being small would help you understand why small things matter. Kate was crying. Tears ran down her face as she stared at the images still swirling in the crystal. All that suffering, she said. All that pain. Wars and famine and disease. We chose that for ourselves. You chose it for your descendants, Mora corrected. Your ancestors knew they could not change themselves. They were too old, too set in their ways. But they hoped that new humans, born into struggle, raised with limitations, would develop the qualities they lacked. Patience, empathy, the ability to see beyond themselves. Ryan stepped forward, his face hard. And did it work? Are we what they hoped we would become? Mora's ancient eyes studied the humans before him. He looked at Daniel, who had left his home to explore the unknown. At Kate, who devoted her life to understanding others. At Ryan, who built things to help people rather than to hurt them. We do not know, he admitted. Your ancestors left a warning. They said that if humanity ever remembered its power, if the abilities returned, then the universe would face the same choice again. Creation or destruction, growth or death. Everything depends on what kind of people you have become. Daniel felt the weight of 10,000 years pressing down on him. The weight of choices made long before he was born. The weight of a future that suddenly seemed very uncertain. The barrier is gone, he said. Our people are free. What happens now? Mora turned back to the memory, watching images swirl within the crystal. Now we wait, he said. And we hope that your ancestors were right to have faith in you. Because if they were wrong, there may be no universe left to save. The humans left the sanctuary that night, carrying knowledge that changed everything they thought they knew. Behind them, Mora stood alone in the chamber, staring at the memory. For the first time in 10,000 years, he allowed himself to feel something like hope. The news reached Earth in waves. First came the official reports, carefully worded by scientists and politicians. Then came the leaked files, spreading across the networks faster than anyone could stop them. Within a week, every person on the planet knew the truth about what humanity had been and what they might become again. The reaction was mixed. Some people refused to believe it. They called it a hoax, a trick, a lie invented by governments to control them. Others believed every word and waited for their powers to appear like children waiting for presents on a holiday morning. Most people fell somewhere in between, uncertain and afraid, going about their daily lives while wondering if everything was about to change. Dr. Maya Collins was a scientist who studied the human brain. She had spent her career trying to understand consciousness, trying to explain how thoughts became actions and dreams became reality. When she read the files from the archivist, she did not see fairy tales. She saw a hypothesis that could be tested. Her laboratory was small, located in a university building that needed repairs. Her funding was limited, her equipment was old, and her colleagues thought she was wasting her time. But Maya had an idea that would not let her sleep. If human belief could change reality, then that change should be measurable. And if it was measurable, it could be studied. And if it could be studied, it could be understood. She gathered volunteers. 3,000 people who were willing to try something that sounded impossible. She connected them through a network that allowed them to see and hear each other from anywhere in the world. She gave them a simple task. Focus on moving a mountain. Not a real mountain. Not at first. She started with a rock. A single stone sitting on a scale in her laboratory, watched by cameras and sensors that measured every possible variable. 3,000 people looked at that stone through their screens and believed with all their hearts that it would move. Nothing happened for hours. The volunteers grew tired, frustrated, distracted. Maya was about to call off the experiment when she noticed something on her instruments. A small change, a tiny fluctuation that should not have been there. The stone was vibrating. She asked the volunteers to try again, this time focusing harder, believing more strongly. The vibration increased. The cameras showed the stone beginning to shake. And then, slowly, impossibly, the stone lifted off the scale and floated in the air. Maya stared at her screens. Her hands trembled. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear in her ears. "Increase the group," she whispered to her assistant. "We need more people." Within a month, she had 10,000 volunteers. Within 2 months, she had 100,000. The experiments grew larger and more ambitious. They moved larger objects. They changed the color of water. They made plants grow overnight. And then, on a clear morning in Nevada, 300,000 people focused their minds on a mountain, not to move it far, just a little, just enough to prove that they could. The ground shook. Alarms went off across the region. Scientists scrambled to explain the earthquake that had struck without warning. But when the surveys came back, there was no earthquake. There was only a mountain that had shifted 40 meters to the east, leaving a gap in the earth where it used to stand. The world went quiet. For one long moment, everyone on Earth stopped what they were doing and understood that nothing would ever be the same. The dream started soon after that. People everywhere reported the same visions, standing among the stars, holding fire in their hands, creating things from nothing. The dreams felt like memories, ancient and powerful, breaking to the walls that had held them for 10,000 years. And then the abilities began to show themselves. A woman in Brazil discovered she could heal wounds with her touch. A man in Japan found he could see things happening on the other side of the planet. A child in Ohio accidentally created a new element, something that had never existed before, simply by imagining what it would look like. The governments of Earth called emergency meetings. Scientists worked day and night to understand what was happening. Religious leaders gave speeches about miracles and destiny. The whole planet buzzed with fear and excitement. Across the galaxy, the conclave watched with growing terror. The leaders of 100 species gathered to discuss what should be done. The archivists had warned them this might happen. They had prepared for it. Hidden in secret facilities across the galaxy were weapons designed specifically to destroy Earth if the barrier ever fell. Weapons that could break planets, poison suns, erase entire solar systems from existence. The vote was close, but in the end, fear won. The order was given. The extermination fleet was assembled. 10,000 ships from 40 different species gathered at the edge of human space. They carried enough firepower to destroy Earth 100 times over. Their commanders believed they were saving the universe from a threat that had nearly destroyed it once before. But not everyone agreed with the decision. Xylith, the Vorn commander who had first discovered the barrier, stood before the conclave and argued for peace. She had met the humans. She had seen something in their eyes that the records did not show. Something new, something that gave her hope. They are not the same, she insisted. 10,000 years have changed them. Give them a chance to prove it. The conclave listened politely and then ignored her. The fleet launched. The countdown to destruction began. On Earth, Captain Daniel Vance received word of the approaching armada. He had become humanity's voice of the galaxy, spending months traveling between worlds, trying to build bridges that the conclave seemed determined to burn. He called Maya Collins. He called Kate Morrison. He called leaders and scientists and ordinary people from every corner of the planet. They are coming to destroy us, he said. They are afraid of what we might become. And maybe they are right to be afraid. Maybe our ancestors were monsters. But we are not our ancestors. We have a choice about what kind of people we want to be. He paused, looking at the faces on his screen. Billions of humans watching, waiting, hoping. The old humanity fought wars with their powers. They used force to solve their problems. But we have spent 10,000 years learning a different way. We have learned that strength is not the same as violence. We have learned that the greatest power is the power to choose peace when war is easy. His voice grew stronger. They are coming with weapons. We will meet them with something else. Something they have never seen. Something our ancestors could not imagine. We will meet them with who we have become. The fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system on a Tuesday morning. 10,000 ships hung in the darkness like a wall of metal and fire, their weapons charged, their crews ready. They had come to end a threat that had haunted the galaxy for 10,000 years. They expected resistance. They expected battle. They expected to fight for their survival against beings of terrible power. They did not expect what they found. Humanity was waiting for them, but not with weapons. There were no warships, no missiles, no defensive platforms bristling with guns. Instead, the entire human species stood together, connected by thought and, their minds linked across billions of kilometers. On Earth, people gathered in parks and streets and living rooms. On Mars, the colonists stood on the red soil and looked up at the stars. On the stations and outposts scattered throughout the solar system, humans of every age and background joined their thoughts to a single purpose. They were not going to fight. The fleet commander, a Voran admiral named Koroth, ordered his ships to advance. He had been chosen for this mission because he had no doubts, no hesitation. He believed absolutely that humans were a danger that had to be removed. The memories of the ancient war were carved into his people's history. He would not let that horror happen again. Fire all weapons, he commanded. 10,000 ships unleashed their fury. Missiles screamed through the void. Plasma beams cut through the darkness. Reality bombs, designed by the archivists themselves, tore holes in the fabric of space. None of it worked. The missiles vanished before they reached their targets. The plasma beams bent away like light through water. The reality bombs simply stopped existing, their terrible power fading to nothing. Koroth stared at his screens in disbelief. Every weapon his fleet possessed was gone, erased as if it had never been built. His ships were still intact, his crews unharmed, but they were completely defenseless. On the horizon's edge, Kate Morrison activated the communication system. Her voice carried across every frequency, reaching every ship in the fleet, every world in the conclave, every being in the galaxy who cared to listen. "We could destroy you," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, without anger or fear. "We have remembered what we are. We can feel the power that our ancestors used to shape the universe. It would be easy to end this. To erase your fleet, your worlds, your entire species. That is what the old humanity would have done." She paused. Across the galaxy, billions of beings held their breath. But we are not the old humanity. We spent 10,000 years in darkness, struggling to survive, learning what it means to suffer. We fought wars over land and water and ideas. We caused pain and felt pain. We lost people we loved and mourned them. We made mistakes and tried to do better. Her voice grew stronger. "Your fear is not wrong. What we were is terrifying. But what we are now is something new. We are humans who know what it costs to hurt others. We are humans who understand that power without wisdom is poison. We are humans who have earned the right to choose through 10,000 years of trying and failing and trying again." On Earth, Daniel Van stood in a field outside his childhood home, the same place where he had once watched the stars and dreamed of the future. Tears streamed down his face as he felt the minds of his entire species join with his own. "Choose," Kate continued. "Choose to see us as we are, not as we were. Choose to give us the chance our ancestors hoped we would earn. Choose to believe that beings can change, that history does not have to repeat, that the universe can be different this time." She took a deep breath. "And in return, we will show you what humanity has become." The power flowed through every human on Earth and beyond. But instead of destruction, it brought creation. Instead of death, it brought life. The collective will of 50 billion minds reached out across the galaxy, not to conquer, but to heal. The ancient scars left by the first human war began to mend. Regions of space that had been dead for millennia bloomed with new stars. Worlds that had been poisoned grew clean and green. Species that had been extinct for 10,000 years found themselves suddenly, impossibly alive, standing in fields of new grass under skies they thought they would never see again. In the Archivist Sanctuary, Morith watched through the memory as reality reshaped itself around human thought. But this reshaping was different from the old stories. It was gentle, careful, respectful. The humans were not forcing the universe to obey them. They were asking it to heal. "They learned," he whispered, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the oldest living being in the galaxy allowed himself to cry. Admiral Koroth stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars change around him. His weapons were gone. His mission was over. He had come to destroy monsters and found something else instead. His communication officer turned to him with wide eyes. "Sir, the Conclave is calling. They want to know our status." Koroth was silent for a long moment. He thought of his children back home, of the world he had fought to protect, of the fear that had driven him across the galaxy. He thought of the stories his grandmother had told him about the ancient shapers, the beings who had once been gods. Those beings had been terrible, but the people who had just spared his life were not those beings. "Tell the Conclave that the mission is over," he said finally. "Tell them the humans have made their choice. And tell them that I believe they deserve a chance to prove they mean it." 1 week later, the Galactic Conclave voted to welcome humanity into the community of species. It was not a unanimous decision. There were still those who feared, those who doubted, those who would never forgive the sins of the ancient past. But it was a beginning. Daniel Van stood before the assembled leaders of 100 worlds, wearing the simple uniform of an explorer, representing a species that had been locked away for 10 millennia. "We do not ask you to forget what we were," he said. "We cannot forget ourselves. The memory of what our ancestors did will stay with us forever, a warning and a burden. But we ask you to give us a chance to show you what we have become. Not gods, not monsters, just humans, neighbors, friends." He extended his hand, an ancient human gesture of peace. "We broke the universe once. Let us help you fix it. Let us earn the trust our ancestors destroyed. Let us prove that 10,000 years of pain were not wasted." Slowly, hesitantly, the first alien hand reached out to take his. And somewhere in the heart of the universe, in a place beyond time and space, the spirits of the ancient humans who had chosen to forget watched their children finally become what they had always hoped they could be. The prison was gone. The secret was revealed. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the universe had hope